today's event, and we've got Andy Nielsen on my immediate right here with the glasses. Andy co-founded a company called King and Country in Hong Kong over 30 years ago. He's a serial entrepreneur. He set up a number of Hong Kong bar brands, which I'm sure he'll tell you about, including Mad Dogs in Central and in Kowloon, and Joe Bananas in Wan Chai. And he has another business right now, which is his big business, which he'll tell you about shortly. He first came to Hong Kong in 1977 to join what was then the Royal Hong Kong Police. And then further to the right, Malcolm Offord, who's a former senior partner at Charterhouse Capital Partners. He has a boutique family advisory office called Badenoch & Co. In Edinburgh. And he's got a number of other strings to his bow, but he'll also tell you about his businesses in the next few minutes. And what we'll do is each of them will speak for about 10 minutes, and then we'll open up the floor to questions, and then conclude our lunch. So I'm going to ask Andy to come up first and say a few words, and then Malcolm. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon. It's terrific to be back at the FCC again. One of my greatest regrets is that I didn't join when I had the chance about 35 years ago. But if I may, I'd like to make two admissions right from the very beginning. Number one, when it comes to running a business or running businesses, I like to think that I've made every mistake that there is to make in business and then some. And the other thing is, whatever success that I've managed to achieve with other people would only be possible, and I believe could only be possible, in Hong Kong. But before we get into that, I'd like to tell you a little bit about how I came to Hong Kong originally. So we go back to 1977, and I had just left the Royal Marines after completing 5 years as a Marine Commando. So that, I felt, gave me a good chance in Hong Kong. But how that even came about was the fact that Britain in those days was a very, very depressing place, even more depressing than it may be at the moment. Going back to the 70s, it was the time of the 3-day working week. It was the time of every winter there would be a major strike that would bring the entire country to a halt. Well, I was, at that time, 28 years old, and I was desperate to get out of the country. And I looked around for many places. And funnily enough, a buddy of mine who'd left the Corps 6 months before me had come out to Hong Kong to join the Royal Hong Kong Police. And he said, well, look, if you're really that desperate to get out, why don't you come out to Hong Kong and join the police as well? And I said, well, to be honest, I don't think I'm big enough. He goes, listen, you're bigger than most Chinese guys. So we applied to the Hong Kong government office in London in the aptly named Grafton Street and got the interview and came out 6 weeks later. So here we are in Hong Kong, 1977. Actually, I quite enjoyed being a policeman. However, we were among the worst paid expats in Hong Kong. My salary as a junior inspector of police in those days was a princely sum of $2,500 a month. Now that sounded pretty good in the UK, but by the time you came to Hong Kong, you realised that it really wasn't that good. But the one thing that impressed me almost as soon as I got here was the wealth of opportunities that were surrounding you. So it didn't take me long to realise that the police and myself would part ways. So I resigned from the police after a couple of years, and normally in those days, when you resigned from the police, you were sent to traffic division. Well, for some reason, my boss said, look, you actually studied graphic design at college. Yeah. He said, well, why don't I speak to a friend of mine in police public relations and see if we can get you in there. So I worked for 3 months in the Police Public Relations Bureau in police headquarters in Arsenal Street. Loved it, got on great. And at the end of that, the boys at GIS, just down the road from here, said, would you like to have a contract with us? I said, certainly. So I took a 3-year contract with the Hong Kong government. Well, the great thing was, working for the Hong Kong government, anybody that's worked for them, you don't actually have to work all that hard. I found that I could do lots of freelance. And in those days, they actually allowed people to do freelance work as well. So I started doing work for anybody that needed graphic design. That could be a business card, a letterhead, a leaflet, a flyer, or in my case, I got a lot of work doing magazine covers and cartoons for newspapers, and eventually ended up doing a little political cartoon that appeared once a week in the SCMP. And that was when I got the chance to join the FCC, which I never took up, and I should have at the time. However, where do we go from there? At the end of the 3 years, we could see that we didn't want to stay in government. My first wife and myself decided that we would set up a little freelance graphic design studio. At the same time, my first wife, my second wife is here, and by the way, I have to say, I'm not planning in any more. So I'm sticking with the second one, if she'll stick with me. But anyway, my first wife, Laura, like many police wives, had got a job working in a place that some of the older members here might remember, called the Bull and Bear. The Bull and Bear in Hutchison House was a great British pub. But they had this policy that no woman was ever promoted into management. Only men could do management. How wrong could they be? So after a number of years, and successful years, I have to say, doing the graphic design business, we'd managed to save all our pennies up. And Laura said, why don't we open up our own pub? So we decided, we looked around, and we found an old carpet warehouse just round the corner from here in Wyndham Street, Hollywood Road. We took a lease, and we opened up Mad Dogs. And that was our first success. 2 years later, we thought, well, let's see if it's a fluke, or let's see if we can do it again. And we went down to Wan Chai, and we opened up a bar called Joe Bananas. That was in 1986. Now, we had one of our managers used to say that there was two things that you could see from the moon with a naked eye. One was the Great Wall of China, and the other was the queue outside Joe Bananas on a Wednesday ladies' night. Anyway, from there, all the time, I'd still been doing graphic design, and we still had a little graphic design studio. But then we decided to do something completely different. I had become a toy soldier collector. Now, for some of the older gentlemen here, they may remember what toy soldiers used to be like 40, 50, 60 years ago. There were little ones that used to cost about sixpence each in old British money. Well, we started collecting those. All of those ones had disappeared. But there was a market for actually reproducing that type of thing, and they were now much more expensive and much more collectible. So we set up a little company called King and Country. Now, that wasn't quite as easy as it sounds, because first of all, we had to find who could manufacture these things. Well, I was very fortunate that one of my clients in the graphic design business was the Hong Kong Trade Development Council. So I phoned up the Hong Kong Trade Development Council, spoke to a person there, said, look, are there any companies still in Hong Kong that can do hand-painted, handmade, all-metal toy soldiers? And within 24 hours, they came back with the very last factory that could still do that. And it was up in Chai Wan. And I have to say, if any of you have ever seen the movie Oliver, the musical, and remember what Fagin's den was like, this is what this factory was like. It was Dickensian, but they did great work. So we started manufacturing our own little toy soldiers, and initially just selling them right here in Hong Kong. Just round the corner from Mad Dogs, on the entrance to Lang Kwai Fong, there used to be a lovely old Victorian building. One of my friends who was also in the property business said, look, there's a little shop there that's for rent. Why don't you put your toy soldiers in there? So we took this little shop, it was gorgeous, and we moved in there, and that was 1986, and opened up the first King and Country shop. Sadly, it's no longer there, because nothing stays the same forever. But two of my greatest regrets are, financial regrets that is, the first is with Mad Dogs. Those that remember the original building, it was 6 floors high. It was actually owned by an American gentleman. And he came to see me one day and he said, how would you like to buy the building? What, you mean the whole building? Yeah. Well, how much? $6 million for the entire building, right? Well, this was not long after we'd opened Mad Dogs. We'd put our entire life savings. By the way, that original investment was $1.25 million Hong Kong dollars to open the pub. So we had no money. So we had to say, I'm sorry, but no can do. He came back a year later, still for sale. How much is it? $8 million. But by that time, we were already planning on doing Joe Bananas, so the money was elsewhere committed. Eventually, that building, and long before it became Lang Kwai Fong Hotel, that gets sold for something like $80 million. So there's the case of the one that you missed the boat. Now, there's been many other things like that over the years, and what I just want to say is that Hong Kong's been essential to the success of any business that I've managed to do here. It's given me the opportunity. It's a very flexible economy where you actually get to meet people in all kinds of different ways of life and kind of businesses that you can work with. I believe that everybody that comes to this town is given opportunities, but not everyone knows when to grab them. I have to say my final thing is, as I say, I've made every mistake that there is to make. There are no safety nets in Hong Kong. So if you fall from a great height, unless you're lucky to hit a branch on the way down, you'll come to ground zero with a resounding thud. But having said that, if you're willing to take chances, if you're willing to occasionally sail a little bit close to the wind, you can be successful in this town. And there's one other thing, just work hard. It's no secret that if everybody else in the office is working 8 hours a day, you work 9 hours or you work 10 hours, you'll be amazed at how successful you'll be. So that's my little bit for today. I'm sure there might be some things you want to ask later. I hope there is. But if I may, let me pass you over to my fellow Scot, Malcolm, and he can take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. So my name's Malcolm Offord. I live in Edinburgh. I grew up in a small, unfashionable town on the west coast of Scotland called Greenock. I got a fabulously good education there. Went to Edinburgh University to read law because my headmaster said, you've got 3 choices if you're a bright boy. You'd be a doctor, lawyer, or accountant. Classic Scottish education. I read law at Edinburgh. I hated the subject and managed to avoid becoming a lawyer. Went to London. And I did 27 years in the city. So I'm actually gone back to Edinburgh. I'm a returning refugee. I'm the only Scotsman I know who's actually moved their tax code from England to Scotland voluntarily in the last 3 years. So I'm just going to talk through 3 little themes, and we'll see whether we can pull any threads together on it. The first one is the National Museum of Scotland. So that's a building in Chambers Street, 150 years old. I am the chairman of the development board there. And we're just coming to the end of an £80 million refurbishment, which has taken 15 years. The last piece of this great museum, which you must visit, this is now the most visited attraction in the UK outside of London. It's top 10, the only one not in London, the top 10 UK. 2.5 million people go through there every year. So Andy was talking about collection of toy soldiers. The last collections that are going in here are from China, Japan, and Korea. And I've just put 1 or 2 examples up of some of the ceramics and some of the silk that we've got at our disposal here. Some beautiful objects from 15th, 16th century. These are world-leading artifacts. We will actually here have the largest Chinese textile collection in Europe, in Scotland, largest Oracle bone collection outside of actually in China, and the most comprehensive collection of Chinese material, communist era material in Europe. So this is a seriously good collection. To put this in context, the Egypt collection we have at the National Museum is the 4th best in the UK. Sorry, in the world. But it's the only one that's collected legally, because the English guys, they're the aristocrats, they just nicked it. The Scots guys, a bit more educated, went down there and actually curated it, documented it, catalogued it, and the Egyptian government was so pleased about that they gave us a tomb for free. So we have a royal tomb in Scotland that is actually ours legally. That's the National Museum of Scotland, and what is that about? That is about collections sent back from around the world by Scotsmen and Scotswomen over the last 200 years. It's about enterprising Scots who went overseas, were successful in foreign lands, but there was something in them that wanted to collect, and something in them that wanted to educate, and something in them wanted to send back, and they've sent back these incredible collections now on display. So that's theme number one. Theme number two is whiskey. So Scotland's famous for many things. There's 108 distilleries in Scotland, and there's 16 new ones being built right now. This is one of them. I'm the chairman of this company. It's called the Borders Distillery Company. It's based in Hawick. This is an old building. It was the old Hawick Electric Company. Hawick was the first of the border towns to get electricity. And this building was 1888, and we have renovated it and are putting inside it brand new pipes and drums. So we are going to have capacity of 1.5 million litres per annum, using all the latest technology, going into this fabulous old building. And when you go and visit it, you'll walk in there and say, oh my God, this has been here for 150 years. And of course the building has been, but it's a brand new whiskey distillery. And right now in Scotland we have a combination of the micro brewing, the craft brewing and distillery and gin. We have probably the leading distillery expertise certainly in Europe. We have this 888, this is our 8 years to profitability. I just want to mention the gin. We're going to do some gin here, Borders gin, because when you do whiskey, as you know, you have to put it into wood for a minimum of 3 years to be Scotch. And we'll do a 5-year-old malt and an 8-year-old malt. So what do we do in the meantime to try and make some revenue? We do some blends, but we're going to do this Borders gin. So here's a wee story. How do we name, what are we going to call this Borders gin? So gin's all about botanics, right? It's all about flavouring. It's ready alcohol. You can get it flavoured and out into market within 6 weeks. Botany is owned by Scotland, okay? As is medicine is owned by Scotland, going back 200 years ago. If you were to go to Kew Gardens 200 years ago, 90% of the gardeners were Scots. On Scotch. All the head gardeners, the big houses in England, Chatsworth, Longleat, would all be Scottish. And it may be to do with the fact that we're well educated, the Scots, and they were sort of the artisan Scots where if they didn't become doctors, they became botanists. There was a science to it and also a feel for it. In Kew Gardens now, where all the plants have been collected from around the world, they have this thing called the top 10 plant hunters. And these were the guys that went out into the empire and collected all the plants, and they're all Scottish, every one of them. Now, the most famous one is a guy called Robert Fortune. Robert Fortune was sent out, came on a boat, the British East India Company, about 200 years ago, and walked into China wearing a dirty old raincoat and a satchel. And without anyone noticing, he basically stole 200 varieties of Chinese tea without anyone noticing. And he got back on the boat in Hong Kong, and they sailed him down to Ceylon, where they planted the Indian tea plantations, right? Now, you can understand now in today's world, I think it's quite interesting why the Chinese would say, why do we need to respect intellectual property when you came into our country and nicked all our tea? One of the top 10 plant hunters, a guy called William Kerr. And William Kerr, he's got 198 varieties to his name in Kew Gardens, and he's born and bred in Hawick. So we're playing with this idea of maybe having this gin called William Kerr's Borders Gin, trying to link it back again to this idea of this enterprising Scotsman being out in the world collecting and giving it some provenance. So that's the second theme. Third theme is the company here, Cashmaster, and Gordon Mackay here as Chief Exec is with me. We've been doing a bit of business this week, and Gordon's pretty much based here. This is a small Scottish company which employs 50 people in Dalgetty Bay in Fife, and it makes a little weighing machine, a little weighing scale which weighs, it can weigh anything you like, but we use it to weigh money, and it'll count your till for you in 45 seconds. So instead of you sitting there counting by hand all your notes, coins, etc., and taking you 8 minutes, we can do that for you in 45 seconds. And it's the piece on all the UK retailers, Sainsbury's, Tesco, Asda, etc., used it to basically reconcile the till to the EPOS system. And every time you have a change of cashier, you can do that immediately and quickly. So when I came back to Edinburgh, I set up my little company, I said to myself, I want to invest in companies, Scottish companies, which have got ambition, which have got international ambition and aspiration. And I came up with this wee strapline called MISA, Made in Scotland, Sold Abroad. And that's basically what Cashmaster does. 80% of his revenue comes from outside of Scotland. So it's basically saying a small country can't exist by just selling to itself. It's got to get up and out, just like our great-grandfathers used to do around the world. That's our new factory. We just invested in that. And these are a list of clients all around the world. And we're delighted that we've got Park and Shop now here in Hong Kong. We've also got KFC here, M&S, Pret. And this is all to do with this idea that actually, despite all the digital world that we have, we understand contactless is increasing everywhere. There's still a record amount of cash in circulation. Bank of England last week just put a report out that basically said the circulation of cash in the UK is at a 20-year high. Same in America, same in the OECD. And certainly, China aside, certainly in the ASEAN countries, there's still a lot of cash. And it's being counted by hand, and we can make that much more efficient. So this is 30-year-old technology. So it's not something you would call new technology, but it's fantastic technology which allows companies to be more efficient. And if we can generate sales in Asia, then we can grow this company, and fundamentally we then create more employment in Scotland in a small town. We can actually regenerate a country which is basically still suffering a little bit from the post-industrialization that went on. And our ambition, therefore, is that by investing into whether it's Cashmaster, whether it's whiskey companies in small towns in Scotland, we can regenerate what was once a proud manufacturing country. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, both. That's really interesting. Funny enough, I was in Kew Gardens about 2 days ago because I happened to be in London. I'm going to ask a couple of questions that spring to mind, but and then we'll open it up to all of you, and I'm sure you've got questions. It's a really interesting and sort of varied bunch of businesses you've all been involved in. You're either serial entrepreneurs or simultaneous multi-entrepreneurs, or both, I think. So they were both great talking points. I just want to ask, first of all, about something that you said, Andy, about Hong Kong in particular being a wealth of opportunity, or providing a wealth of opportunities. Do you think that's changed over time, and do you think in what way have the kinds of opportunities changed for Hong Kong over time? I mean, because you've been here for what, more than 30 years, right?
40 years. Yeah. No, I don't think it has totally changed. It's developed, and of course it's not going to be exactly the same. But I remember one of the people that I met in the very early days was Simon Murray, who at that time was the taipan of Hutchison. And I remember Simon saying to me, "Listen, Andy, if you want to succeed in this town, first of all, if anyone asks, can you do something, always say yes. Because two things will happen. Either one, you will be able to do it, in which case you've won a watch, or two, you won't be able to do it, in which case you've lost nothing." And really, I always believed that. Another thing that I found was very encouraging, and we spoke about this earlier with Victor, was how approachable even very senior members of staff were, or even the tops of companies, that you could actually get to them. Much more so in the old days, I have to say, up to 1997. Post-97, it's become a little bit more difficult, and that I find is rather sad. And the other thing is that I think has had an effect in Hong Kong since 97. In the old days, again, pre-97, lots of flotsam and jetsam washed up in the shores of Hong Kong, and I count myself among that number. But in among the number were lots of people that did succeed. And now it's become much harder to actually come into Hong Kong. You must have a job, you must have a work visa to get here. I can understand why that is, but I do believe that Hong Kong's lost something because of that.
Thanks. And while I've got you on the mic, what kind of satirical political cartoons did you do, and were they sort of very savage, and would you be able to do them today in a similar tone, or do you think that's changed as well?
It was kind of interesting because when I was doing them for the SCMP, the editor was Robin Hutchin, and I was never paid a weekly salary or anything like that. I was paid by cartoon. So most of the time, Robin was terrific. If I was having a go at one of the big hongs or something like that, or even the government, generally speaking, he would let me do it. But just occasionally, if something ran too close to the bone, the cartoon just, didn't appear. I think it's a lot harder now. There is a kind of self-censorship. Back in the old days, as you remember, you may remember Open Line. People like me used to phone up complaining about the government left, right and centre. I've got my own views on how well the government's doing these days, but I keep them basically to myself. I don't want to make waves. I don't want to suddenly find when I go up to Low Woo that I can't cross the border. So I'm still a guest. Even after 40 years, I'm still a guest here, and I don't forget that. So tread carefully.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn to Malcolm now. I'm curious about Cashmaster. It's a manufacturing business, basically, right? Isn't there intense competition from Chinese companies that make similar things? Well, what is the kind of competitive advantage that Cashmaster has that can't be provided by a company in Shenzhen at half the price? I mean, obviously the big challenge for manufacturing companies making in Europe has always been that sort of cost differential.
So the technology has been around 30 years. It's basically an algorithm. It's a load cell weighing scale with an algorithm, but it's clever the way it calibrates and self-educates. So there's a bit of knowledge, there's a bit of magic in there. There's only 2 companies in the world that make this, and one's in Wales, in Newport Gwent, and the other one is in Fife, in Scotland. And it's very interesting. You would say, why is it there's no German, French, Italian, American equivalent? And it just was something the Brits invented, and the 2 guys that got it fought with each other over the patent and eventually just split it between the 2 of them. So yes, it could be ripped off, it could be copied, anything can be copied in China. But at the end of the day, the most important thing about this machine is it must be accurate, it must be reliable, and it must be trusted. And you might do a rip-off of your Patek watch because nobody might look at it too closely. But if you're going to count your money, you need to make sure that it is absolutely accurate. And what we know, having done tests with the cheap equivalents, is they don't count accurately. So therefore, it becomes a brand. It becomes a branded thing. If you use a Cashmaster, you can trust it.
So it is basically hardware that's quite high-tech and with some quite high-tech software as well.
Yes. And then that software is continually integrated, and we integrate that into the systems to make sure that we're fully embedded then into the system. So we're now embedded in Sainsbury, Tesco, Asda, etc. It's quite difficult to take us out of that now. And we want to do the same here in Asia.
Thanks very much. Now let's see if you guys have questions. I mean, there's such a range of interests that were expressed there. Who's got a question for either Malcolm or Andy? Yeah, Nigel at the back. Say who you are, even though I know who you are, but not everybody does.
Tim Huxley. I'm in the shipping business in Hong Kong, having come here in '89. Gents, I mean, Scotland, its contribution to humanity is on a huge scale. I mean, penicillin, television, I mean, Scottish rugby team's occasionally quite good. Jackie Stewart, Jim Clark. I mean, yeah, these are great names. So why is your football team so crap?
Well, Gordon Strachan was recently in a lot of trouble over this because he actually tried to define that to the press, and he said it's because we were genetically challenged. We're too small.
Sorry, I don't know why I called you Nigel. Sorry, you must look like a Nigel. I'm a bit jet lagged. But actually, I mean, there is an issue of sort of countries with small populations. There are advantages, aren't there?
Well, Iceland have just qualified for the World Cup, and they've got a population of 750,000. I mean, the issue with, and they beat England, just to be clear, in the last World Cup. So, and no Scots people were obviously cheering for that result. There is an issue, I think, in all the Western economies that we have got a less active, youthful population. There's no question about it. And since we've deindustrialized, when there was more hardcore, what you might call working class communities, whether it was in mines or shipyards, they were very steely communities. And if you wanted to get out of there, you had to be either clever or a boxer or a footballer. And there was actually some method to get, that was your way out. Now we're seeing that there's just not the same hunger, there's not the same sport, and there's a worry across Scotland that we're not producing, certainly in the soccer the way we used to.
The population would be about the same as Hong Kong or Singapore, right?
5.3 million,
but not quite as concentrated in one city, obviously. So
yeah. Scotland has 8% of the population, but 33% of the landmass.
Of the UK.
Of the UK, yeah.
I think the other thing is that I always say that Scotland's a great place to come from. It's just a hell of a place to live in, you know? And I think that's been Scotland's greatest export, has been people. Now, this man here is actually trying to do something about that, which is really encouraging. You know, but we need more guys like Malcolm who literally are trying to bring industry back to life. And I genuinely hope he succeeds. But in terms of the football team, I have to echo Malcolm's remarks that poverty was always great for producing boxers and footballers. So get rid of poverty, and strangely enough, you don't have too many good football players or boxers.
I mean, just about the sort of manufacturing. There is a kind of reshoring going on, isn't there? And I just wonder whether what you're doing in Fife, I think, isn't it? Whether that can be replicated or is being replicated elsewhere with China's advantage of low-cost labor, manual labor in factories. These sort of factories, Foxconn factories making Apple phones, which used to have incredible numbers of people, like 300,000 people. Those are really in the past now.
Yeah.
And a lot of countries in Asia with large young populations, I think possibly are going to have a problem because it is now possible to do manufacturing back in the West because it's quite automated. It's quite, the US is doing this in some cases. Car manufacturers are doing it everywhere. It is now possible to manufacture competitively in an industrialized country. And I just wonder whether you see that kind of thing changing further. I mean, maybe everybody doesn't have to make all their stuff in Guangdong anymore. Or Vietnam. I mean, maybe we're going to see that. We had a big article in the FT the other day about Nike, which employs an astonishing number of people in its factories around the world. Many of them in Asia. I think more than 1 million people are employed by Nike in various factories, and they are increasingly using sort of high-tech automation, and that will massively reduce the number of employees that they have and reduce their costs at the same time. So I just wonder whether we're going to see that trend of more industrial businesses returning to, whether it's Scotland or England or Germany or anywhere.
Well, certainly, if you look at the British car manufacturing sector now, it's the best and healthiest it's ever been. Record number of people employed and record amount of margin, but it's all gone high end. It's basically assembling of the top of the food chain, the electronics piece, the branding piece, the basic commodity pieces will be shipped in. So I think as long as you can move up the technology curve, I think there is definitely an opportunity to get more manufacturing back into Western economies. And of course, in Asia, as your labour costs go up as well, then you've got your issues about how competitive you can be vis-a-vis the UK, and certainly in America. This is the big hope for America, isn't it? That they can get the Rust Belt going again by onshoring jobs.
Yeah, tell us about your because you make the soldiers you make in Shenzhen or in China.
Yeah. Well, talking about manufacturing, we were one of the first companies to move in to China, southern China, to manufacture these little toy soldiers, and it was fantastic. I mean, in the good old bad old days, it was just so cheap to manufacture great quality product. But that only lasted a certain amount of time. When we first moved in, the factories we worked with had maybe 300-400 painters. Now, these painters were usually young women between 16 to 25. I remember one time in America, I was asked, why are they always between 16 and 25? I said, well, that's because they're the most dexterous, and also because their eyesight is perfect at that point. Well, what happens at 25? I said, well, the eyesight fails, they all go blind and we kill them. Obviously, I got a very shocked look. I said, no, I'm only joking. That's not true. Not at all true. But the fact of the matter is that production costs in China have skyrocketed, and as they should. I mean, China doesn't have to be the cheap workshop to the world. The quality of the work, we've looked at other places. We've looked at Vietnam, we've looked at the Philippines, we've looked at Sri Lanka, we've looked at Bangladesh. None of them is as reliable as China. So we would rather pay the extra money to get the quality and the reliability than to go to some of these other places where even if you get a cheaper product, it won't be as good, and you'll still have to face the customs and what have you in those places that are all looking for backhanders. So China, it's a bit like better the devil you know than the devil you don't know. China overall is still a great place to manufacture. You just have to accept it's going to cost you a lot more than it did before.
It's very interesting. Yeah, another question. Gentleman there, yeah.
I want to make a comment about management and then ask about it. The Romans always said that...
Sorry, can you tell us who you are?
I'm Bob Meyer,
Yep.
Pharmalink. I've been here 39 years and done other things. The Romans said that any commander could command a group of 10 men. You know, that you didn't need to be a genius or trained for that. Beyond that, though, you get into management questions. And when I had a company that invested in public equities, I would tell my team, go out and visit these companies and imagine the reverse of the neutron bomb. Most of you will know of that. That was the bomb that was going to be dropped and kill all the people and leave all the assets standing. But I said, imagine the reverse of that, where all the assets would be reduced to powder, but the people would be standing like an army in the field. That's what you're investing in. And in entrepreneurs, there are many, many stories of people coming up with the right invention, but then not able to take it to the next step. So my question to you is, have you faced these challenges before, and how do you deal with them?
Essentially finding the right people, right?
People. It's all about people.
Well, I mean, from my career as a private equity guy in London for 27 years, that was, forget the modeling, forget the analysis. It was about backing entrepreneurs. It was about backing the right people. So we're on the same page on that. In terms of Cashmaster has been going for 30 years. It was a brilliant Scottish engineer that devised the product, but they had no management. They had no sales and marketing and no ambition. But they actually thrived in spite of themselves because the product was so good. So when Gordon and I have taken over this company, we are saying the product is good, but there's no management in this company. So we are doing a live experiment right now. We can't yet tell you the results. We're only 2 years into it. But we're trying to say to ourselves, can we take this little Scottish company, double it, treble it, quadruple it in size? And that will be largely because of management, ambition, reach, scaling up. And coming to Asia, the biggest challenge we're going to have in the next 12 months here is going to be that if we are successful in winning these orders, how do we scale up in this region? And that will be about people, and that will be about management. So that is core to success, no question.
I think, speaking personally, we've always believed, both Laura and myself, from the earliest days, is you've got to employ good people. You know, spend the money, reinvest in your staff. And we've always tried to do that. And we've been very fortunate that in Hong Kong, the work ethic among Hong Kong people is so strong. Nobody looks at the clock in our office. At least I don't see them looking at it anyway. But again, they come in sometimes early. They'll stay after the official closing time because they want to get a job done so they can start something fresh. I wish I could say that I could see that in the UK, and I think it does exist in certain places in the UK and elsewhere. But here it's still alive and strong in Hong Kong, and long may it continue.
Yeah, I mean, even in journalism, the core of our members here are journalists. It really is about people. You can follow all the rules and still be a bad journalist. You can obey the rules on how to write a story, but if you don't have good judgment and that little thing in your head that says that's a story and that isn't, then you're not a good journalist. And it's very hard to find those people and hard to keep them once you do find them. But I'm sure that applies in all businesses in different ways. Yeah.
Entrepreneurs always fascinate me entrepreneurs always fascinate me because of the taking the plunge and actually knowing which idea you want to back. So my question is, how much of it is head and Excel spreadsheets, whatever, and how much of it is heart for you? Do you just take a leap of faith, or do you have to see the projections and all the rest?
Good question, yeah.
Speaking personally, heart has been most of the ones, a gut instinct that this was right, here was an opportunity. We didn't have spreadsheets way back in the 70s and the 80s. So, yes, those things are useful, but your gut instinct is the best thing you can have. And obviously you get it wrong sometimes. You have to accept that sometimes you're going to fall flat in your face.
Have you had failures? I mean, disasters?
Have I had failures?
So
Yes.
You mentioned that you had. So tell us a particularly catastrophic investment that you made.
Well, strangely enough, going back to Joe Bananas, we'd had this incredible success with Mad Dogs. We earned our money back in something like 13 months, which is unbelievable. Thank you. And then, so when we did Joe Bananas, we were trying to open a singles bar in Wan Chai, which, it can still be a pretty down market area, especially with triads and everything else. And it was a real leap of faith, and it was the first place down there that had a door policy, meaning if the doorman or the manager didn't like the look of your face, and I don't mean what colour you are, it wasn't that kind of thing. It was like, you're not dressed properly, or we don't want you in. We just say, sorry, not tonight. And that created a lot of problems, especially with journalists, I have to say. Some of the ones that complained the most were journalists.
Because we were improperly dressed.
Improperly dressed. So for the first 12 months, every penny we made, we were losing. It was going out as fast as it was coming in, faster than it was coming in. But Laura was the one that said, we're not changing the policy. I'd rather have my place quarter full of people I like than full of people I don't like. And she stuck to her guns, and she was the one that got it right. I was the one that would say, oh God, well, maybe we should relax the rules. No. Laura was definitely a bit like Maggie Thatcher. That lady was not for turning.
Yes. Just here, yeah.
My name's David Bruce, and I was one of those that managed to get through the door policy in the 1980s.
He's wearing a very nice tie, for those of you who can't see.
And I must thank you for those two establishments which got me off to a good start in Hong Kong. My question is, not so much the names, I think I understand, but what was the decision process that you went through to come up with the names Mad Dogs in English and Joe Bananas?
Actually, very easy. We were looking, obviously, when we did Mad Dogs, we wanted a very British sounding name. We were going head to head with the Bull and Bear and the Old Vic and a couple of other establishments that were already well established. So we wanted something that sounded very British. And of course, we all remember the famous Noel Coward song, Mad Dogs and Englishmen. But as Laura and myself are both Scots, there was no way we were calling it Mad Dogs and Englishmen. So let's just call it Mad Dogs. So that was the one behind that. Joe Bananas, a wee bit more circuitous. Back in Glasgow, I remember some great names for pubs. There was one called Zanzibar, which I thought was really exotic sounding. I thought, really, I love that, but I didn't want to use the same thing. We were big fans of the Hard Rock Cafe, the original one in Park Lane in London. Quite like that. We originally got to call Joe Bananas Rock Island, after Hong Kong being built in a rock. But anyway, exotic names. One of my favourite movies was a Woody Allen movie called Bananas. I just like the sound of bananas. And then I remembered that there was a gangster in the mafia called Joseph Banano, and his nickname in the mob was Joe Bananas. And as soon as I said it, I thought, that's the name.
And nothing to do with bananas being mad. I mean, the connection between Mad Dogs and bananas.
Hence Joe Bananas.
Fantastic. We've got time for one more question, and then we have to close. If anybody has another question, otherwise we can wrap up right there. Unless you want. Oh, sorry. You've got yes. So last question here. Yeah.
Yes.
Right at the end.
My name is David Kwan. Can you tell us about some of your interesting encounters with triads and such in the bar business?
Talking of triads, we only ever had one instance of triads trying to get involved. And it just so happened there was a period when we had promoted a couple of our staff to managerial positions. And there was the first time we'd promoted some Hong Kong members to a managerial position. And almost as soon as they became managers, and it was through no fault of their own, but two guys came into Joe Bananas and said, you've got a really nice, they said it in Cantonese, of course, you've got a really nice bar here. You know, I'm sure you want to keep it that way. Oh, yeah. Well, you really need some protection, and we can help provide that. And they were looking for, so they made a demand to provide protection services. They wanted $25,000 a month. Well, having been an ex-copper, I still had quite a few friends in the force. So I phoned up a couple of my mates that were still in the force, told them what had happened, and they said, look, arrange a meeting, get these guys to come down, bargain with them. So these two characters, we arranged a meeting, they came down to Joe Bananas. We got the figure of $25,000 a month reduced to $13,000 a month, and they were to come back in 2 days later to get the first installment. So 2 days later, the two characters appear. They sit down. We hand over $13,000 in carefully marked bills, and they exit stage left. Well, what we didn't know, because the police hadn't told us, all round Joe Bananas that day, there must have been about 7 or 8 plainclothes policemen, road sweepers, dressed as road sweepers, dressed as delivery guys, what have you. As soon as these two guys walked out the door, nabbed. Both of them get 5 years apiece for attempted extortion. Now, that's another great thing about Hong Kong. One of the things I always praise Hong Kong for. Hong Kong loves custodial sentences. There's no little slap in the wrist and don't do it again, you've been a bad boy, right? So these two characters, they were triads.
Weren't they just foot soldiers?
Oh, they were just foot soldiers, but they were foot soldiers that still get 5 years apiece.
No, what I mean was that their boss presumably, was never found. Or...
We had no more. We had more problems with Kowloon Rugby Club than we ever did with triads, I have to say.
On that wonderful note, I think we'll thank Andy and Malcolm very much indeed for a really, really interesting talk. Thank you so much. Oh, and I have to present them with an exotic. Now, I think with this, you will in fact be able to go into Joe Bananas, where it's still there, without any problem at all.
Thank you.
I imagine it's a tie. Yes. So I need one myself. Oh, you need one, yeah.
Thank you.